Good morning. This is Dr. Hansa Das, Department of History, Nirmala College, Ranchi. Today the topic under discussion is commercialization of agriculture, जिसको हिंदी में बोलते हैं कृषि का वाणिज्यीकरण. For the benefit of English medium students today, this lecture is going to be in English. So we are going to discuss today the manner in which agriculture was commercialized during the British period. Now, what is commercialization? Commercialization of agriculture for a very long time was viewed in general by economists as a means by which, number one, specialization in agriculture increased, and number two, productivity increased. That is, if there was an increase in specialization of agriculture and an increase in productivity, then that meant that agriculture was being commercialized. But in a broader framework, it was a principal element in the transition from pre-capitalist to capitalist modes of production. Before we go into the details of commercialization, let us look at what was the pre-British scenario of agriculture, that is, agriculture in India before the coming of the British. Now, social and economic historians have taken much more interest in agrarian system and commercialization of agriculture. According to them, crops like cotton, tobacco, and sugarcane were grown even before the advent of British because land revenue had to be paid mostly in cash. Also, prices of cash crops were greater than prices of food grains. But commercialization of agriculture at that time corresponded to the requirements of a traditional revenue economy. In such an economy, the main form of revenue was a mixture of three things: tax, tribute, and land rent. Land was available in abundance. The dominant elements in land had a privileged position in the system of revenue collection. So they appropriated a part of surplus from the peasants and used this to pay for wage labor. Thus, the power of command and custom in the traditional society was responsible for the economic differentiation within the peasantry. Now, agricultural produce had to be marketed in order to pay land revenue in cash, but the difficulty was that the agricultural surpluses so generated did not lead to a flow of goods and services back to agriculture. This was so because the Nawabs and Zamindars wasted it, and so the gains from trade did not go to those engaged in agriculture. Now, let us look at the British scenario. With the advent of the British, the situation somewhat changed. Now, the primary concern of the rulers was expansion of commerce. So, market forces were introduced into agriculture on a very large scale. Now, let us see what were the effects of such changes. Number one, land became marketable. It could be sold and purchased. It also acquired considerable commercial value. Number two, opportunities for trade in agricultural produce increased. And number three, inflow of finance from outside the agrarian society came from urban traders, money lenders, and also from those who wanted rental income from landed property. Now, land, credit, and labor markets developed along with market for agricultural produce. Thus, in addition to land revenue, a large part of agricultural income was appropriated as rent, interest, and profit. Now, several studies relating to this period talk about the following results. Number one, breakdown of customary relationships and conventions within village society. Number two, transfers in land through sale, mortgage, and leasing. Number three, increase in rural indebtedness. Number four, forced sale of produce. Number five, eviction of peasants. And number six, changes in contractual arrangements with labor. Now, after we have looked into the basic nuances of commercialization of agriculture, a case study has been presented by Amit Bhaduri in which he tries to explain the difference between the agricultural performance of East and West Uttar Pradesh on the basis of the agrarian social history of these regions. The basic hypothesis is related to the nature of commercialization and its effects on agrarian class relations. Now, before we try to compare Eastern and Western UP, there are certain assumptions on this hypothesis. The first assumption is that commercialization cannot be captured by any single statistical index because it is not just a shift in favor of cash crops, neither is it an increase in monetary transactions in an agrarian economy. But the reason is twofold. Number one, the process involves several agricultural markets like product, land, credit, and labor, and there can be contradictions in these markets. And number two, the mechanism underlying commercialization may be different in different historical situations. It could be normal or forced commercialization. So, what is normal commercialization? Before we discuss UP, let us discuss what is normal and what is forced commercialization. So, in normal commercialization, a growing amount of surplus output is marketed. It does not matter whether the surplus is in the form of cash crop or subsistence crop. What is important is that the increased volume of marketed agricultural produce is the result of increased production over self consumption. So, rich agriculturists and progressive landlords increase their production and thus generate surplus. What happens in forced commercialization? Here, the peasants are forced to sell a high proportion of their output, mainly because of increasing cash requirements, usually debt. This forces them to buy again from the market. This leads to distress buying and selling. The method of extracting surplus involves involuntary market involvement of the peasants. This leads to increased revenue or rent and consequently indebtedness. So, traders and money lenders become powerful. Let us see what happened in Eastern UP. In Eastern UP, there was a kind of a permanent zamindari settlement in which zamindars or talukdars were typically large landlords. They had to pay a permanently fixed land revenue in cash by a given date to the colonial administration. In return, they could collect rent from the cultivators settled on their land. So, the income of zamindar was equal to land rent collected minus land revenue paid. Side by side, zamindars could evict peasants in case of default. They began to sublease out land on a large scale. Subleasing was done by members of extended family or money lenders and traders. And therefore, an enormous and complex system of subinfeudation developed. Western UP, more of a Rayatwari settlement with elements of zamindari, temporary settlement of revenue, and the colonial administration could revise revenue claims every 20 to 30 years. Now, in this system emerged a class of relatively well-off tenants, and their occupancy rights were recognized by the state. These tenants had a direct involvement in agriculture. Now, let us see what happened since 1830s. In Eastern UP, there was an increase in the position of superior tenure holders who were mere rent receivers with no direct involvement in agriculture. But in Western UP, the occupancy tenants emerged as relatively secure and prosperous agriculturists. Post-independence period, in Eastern UP, money lenders and traders became owners of land, and in Western UP, occupancy tenants became owners. What happened after zamindari abolition? After zamindari abolition in Eastern UP, the older mix between normal and forced commercialization was left undisturbed. Perhaps when traders and money lenders secured land titles, forced commercialization became even stronger. Thirdly, peasant proprietors failed to become a strong independent class. There was low productive income and more unproductive income. What happened in Western UP? Number one, peasant proprietors emerged on a large scale. Number two, there was more productive income. And number three, there was less reliance on forced commercialization. Therefore, we could conclude by saying that there were variations in agricultural performance of both the regions, and this may be linked to the complex process of commercialization in agriculture. So we have come to know that commercialization of agriculture was a very complex process, and there were different nuances to the understanding of this topic, and I hope the case study which we have provided will be useful for the purpose of this lecture. Hope you find this lecture useful. Thank you.